Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. Today I want to talk about my reading plans for the month of November. Now, I have an early prediction that this is not going to be a very long video because I don't have a lot of books to talk about. Now, don't worry, I'm not like taking a break or anything. I plan to read all month long, but the books I picked are enormous. So each and every one of these books is really important to me. Most of them are things that I've been wanting to read for years. So I'm very excited about the month I have planned, but I'm kind of keeping it, I'm only going to talk about 4 or 5 books today. I'm keeping it on the minimum because I don't want to get distracted by all of the, impulse reads and shiny things. Like this month, I would love to actually stick with what I'm choosing. So I can't wait to show you guys. So the first book I want to show you guys, which is also the first book I plan to crack open and read in November, is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Now, this is a book that I have wanted to read for as long as I can remember because this is my granddad's favorite book of all time, and I always remember they had an immaculate library in the house that they owned while I was growing up. And one book that always grabbed my attention was his mass market paperback copy of Lonesome Dove. And the reason I was so enamored with it was because I could tell he had read it over and over and over. It had loose pages that were falling out. It had ripped pages. The cover had been taped back together 100 times. And I just remember thinking, this must be an amazing book because every other book in their library was in really good condition. It looked like they read them once, took good care of them, and put them back on the shelf. But this one had clearly been well loved. And so I always wondered about it. We had talked about it a few times. I have seen the miniseries, and I remember loving that. But again, I was a kid when I watched that. So I am really excited to get to this. I've had a couple friends read it in the last year or so, and they were all very impressed with it. The things that they liked about it are things that are important to me when it comes to book. Mostly character work. Like that's what I hear over and over and over again is it's not super plot driven. Like it's a Western, it's slow moving, it's about a cattle drive and all that goes along with that. But the character work apparently is some of the best ever put to page. And my brother Benjamin recently read it like last month, and he is just gushing and he is like so excited to talk to me about it. So I told him, I was like, listen, I'm going to make it my first priority for November and we will have all the conversations. So I'm excited for this, not only to just know the story, read the books, get to know the characters, but I'm more excited than anything to kind of like be in the Lonesome Dove club. Because I want to have those conversations. Like that's part of what I like about reading so much is the connections and the conversations and just that bond that forms through loving fictional characters together. So very, very excited to start that journey. And I do think it's going to be a journey. It is a thick book. And like this copy I have is a pretty big trade paperback. It has small font and it's like 850 pages. So thick boy, but I'm excited to read it. The next massive tome that I plan on picking up in November, another one highly anticipated for a few reasons. A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin is, of course, book 3 of A Song of Ice and Fire. I am looking forward to this because it's one of my favorite books I've ever read. It has been a couple of years since I've read it. It's probably been closer to 4 or 5 years. This will be my 3rd time reading it. But I'm doing it as a buddy read with my friend Roger. If you don't know Roger with a D, check him out up here. He has an awesome channel. I absolutely love the way he talks about books. And he is a Game of Thrones fanatic, but this is his first time reading it through. So it's so fun to read your favorite books with people who are experiencing them for the first time. So I've kind of been hanging out with him while he read a Game of Thrones and a Clash of Kings over the last couple months. But this one I was like, I want to make sure we're reading it together because it is such a good book. In this video right here, I recently referred to it as like the ultimate 5-star book. And I think like, we'll see how I feel after reading it again, but I don't think that can change. Like I have read a lot of really good books since I last read A Storm of Swords, but in my mind, I don't see it changing on the rankings at all. Like it's an immaculate book and I'm so excited to read it again. This next one is my ultimate like late to the party. I'm talking, guys, Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Yeah, I've never read this book. When I first discovered BookTube, kind of got back into reading, and, at first I got back into reading, and then I started poking around on YouTube to see if people were talking about books. And of course they were. This is a book that everyone was talking about because it wasn't new by any means at that point, but people were still really having this conversation about Name of the Wind. And it's this amazing book that most people seem to love. But I, like I said, I just gotten back into reading. And so I was really trying to prioritize what I was reading. And something that was not only an unfinished series, but a famously unfinished series. Like, he's kind of becoming his own punchline at this point with the unfinished series thing. It just was never high priority to me because I had so many other things I wanted to get through. I had boxes to check. I had Mount Rushmore reads to get to. I had all these Mount Everest. Gosh, I like mountains a lot today. I had all these goals that I had to, get under my belt. And I have by no means arrived as a fantasy reader, but I have really checked off my list. I've made a lot of progress in the last several years. And it's time, you guys. I've got to know what the big deal is about Patrick Rothfuss and the Name of the Wind. I love me some beautiful prose. That's what he's known for. I've heard mostly good things about this book, but there are some hot takes out there. There are people, like namely my friend Mike, who just really did not click with this book and do not like it. So it will be interesting for me to see where I land. But more than anything, it's just time. Apparently, it's a great book, and there's no reason I haven't read it yet. It doesn't bother me that it's unfinished because, I've been told that it stands pretty well on its own. But more than anything, I want to read things that are good, even if they're incomplete. Like you guys know how I stand for A Song of Ice and Fire. I will always tell people it's worth the read, even though it's unfinished. So I would be a little bit of a hypocrite if the only reason I didn't read this was because it was unfinished. So I'm very excited to get to it, to have my own opinion about it, but more than anything, to experience something that is largely regarded as wonderful. Something else I'm very excited to get to in November is one of my most anticipated new releases for the year. And I don't have it on hand because, of course, it's not even out yet. And that is The Lonesome Crown by Brian Lee Durfee, which is the third and final installment in the Five Warrior Angels trilogy. I reread the first two books just, last month and the month before, and they are just as good, if not better, than I remember them being. So I'm very, very excited for the release of the final book. The only bummer for me is, you guys know how I like to compartmentalize my months and try to wrap things up by the end of the month and start new books at the first of the month. Well, this is going to be a release day read for me. I'm going to start it the moment I can get my hands on it. But it comes out like the 28th of November, I think. And it's going to be enormous. Like, I already know it's going to be like 1,000 pages. So there's clearly no way I'm going to get it finished in November. But that's okay. I can live with it. And I'm going to start it in November for sure. But it'll be the bulk of it read in December, I'm sure. So as you can tell, everything I've talked about so far, they've been huge books. Like, I've already shown you guys 4 books that are anywhere from 800 to 1,000 pages each. So if that's all I consume in November, I'm not going to be disappointed with myself. But if I have any extra time, I want to get back into reading more standalone Stephen King stuff. Most of the Stephen King I read all year has been Dark Tower related, and then I read Fairy Tale, which is a new release. I think I've read a couple sprinkled out through in there, like Cujo, that was great, and right now I'm currently reading Christine. And it's reminded me about how much I love picking up those Stephen King standalones and using them as, I guess I'll call them palate cleansers, but they are just a great break for me when I'm in any type of a slump. So I want to read Desperation, and another one that's been on my radar lately, and then a friend mentioned it on Discord, which kind of like popped it back into my mind, is The Dead Zone. I have a lot of his back catalog to work through still, so I'm not, at slim pickings at this point. I have a lot of great Stephen King books that I haven't read yet, but for some reason, Desperation and The Dead Zone are 2 that I definitely want to get to sooner rather than later. And that's all, folks. Another reason that I really am trying not to overload myself with a huge reading month as far as quantity goes. I'm not in any type of rush or any type of race because I do want to put more effort into this channel. I want to be a little more consistent, and I'd like to get myself into some sort of routine now that my day-to-day life situation has changed. You know, kids are in a new school. I'm no longer at my previous position with work, and so I do have more time during the day. And even though I truly have no aspirations of turning this channel into anything more than a fun hobby, I would like to be a little more consistent and come up with some sort of, routine for myself for recording and editing, and maybe teaching myself some new things when it comes to recording and making my videos a little nicer for you guys. So if you have any requests, any suggestions, any ideas for me as far as videos you'd like to see, or just, feedback on these videos, I genuinely would love to hear it. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for all your support of my channel and these videos. And I hope you guys have an amazing November.